Before cities had names, before borders were drawn, before kings wore crowns, there was a land shaped by sun, sand, and a river that refused to die. This land is Sudan. Sudan is one of the oldest homes of human civilization on Earth. Long before many parts of the world learned how to build, farm, or write, people here were already living, creating, believing, and dreaming. At the center of everything was the Nile. The Nile was not just a river, it was a lifeline. It was food, it was water, it was a road, it was a story flowing from generation to generation. Every year the Nile flooded its banks and left behind rich, dark soil. This soil allowed crops to grow in the middle of dry lands. Villages formed along its sides. Families stayed. Life began to organize itself. Thousands of years ago, people in Sudan learned to farm, raise animals, make pottery, and bury their dead with care. They believed life did not end with death. They believed the soul continued its journey. These early peoples slowly formed powerful societies. One of the earliest great civilizations in Africa was Kerma. Kerma rose in northern Sudan around 250 A. It was not small, it was not weak. It was a strong African kingdom with kings, armies, craftsmen, and traders. The kings of Kerma ruled with authority. They controlled trade routes along the Nile and into the deserts. Gold, ivory, cattle, and precious stones passed through their lands. Kerma challenged even ancient Egypt. Egypt did not rule Sudan at first. Sudan stood on its own. Later came the kingdom of Kush, became one of the most powerful civilizations in African history. Its capital shifted from Napata to Merowe, both located in what is now Sudan. Yes, Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt. The Kushites built pyramids for their kings and queens. They believed rulers were chosen by the gods and guided the people between the human world and the spiritual one. Their gods included Amun, the great hidden god, lion gods of strength, nature spirits tied to land and river, religion, power, and daily life were deeply connected. The Kushites became so powerful that they once ruled Egypt itself. These rulers are known as the Black Pharaohs, the 25th dynasty of Egypt. From Sudan they ruled a vast empire stretching northward. They restored temples, respected traditions, and ruled with confidence. But power never lasts forever. Eventually Kush declined as trade routes changed and foreign pressures increased. Yet Sudan did not disappear. It transformed. In Merowe, people developed their own writing system. They became skilled in iron making, creating weapons and tools that spread across the region. Women held remarkable power. Some queens, known as Kandekes, ruled as warriors and leaders. Sudan was not silent history. It was loud with life, belief, and ambition. But change was coming. New religions, new empires, new ways of seeing the world. The ancient gods would slowly fade, and new faiths would rise along the Nile. And with them, Sudan would enter another chapter, one shaped by belief, learning, and cultural transformation. As the ancient temples of Kush slowly fell silent, as old gods faded into memory, a new belief began to flow into Sudan, quietly, peacefully, carried by ideas rather than armies. Christianity arrived in Sudan around the 6th century, not as invasion, but as influence. Three powerful Christian kingdoms rose along the Nile: Nobatia in the north, Makuria in the center, Alodia in the south. These kingdoms were deeply religious, organized and educated. Churches were carved into stone. Walls were painted with colorful images of saints, angels, kings, and queens. Priests and scholars copied books by hand. Faith shaped law, art, and daily life.
O Lord, hear our prayer, and let our cry come unto thee.
Makuria became especially strong, so strong that when Muslim armies expanded across North Africa and Egypt, Makuria stood its ground. In the 7th century, Muslim forces reached Sudan's borders. But something rare happened. Instead of endless war, Sudan and the Muslim world signed a peace agreement called the Pact. This agreement lasted for nearly 600 years. Trade continued. Peace held, religions lived side by side. Islam slowly spread, not through force but through merchants, scholars and families. Mosques appeared beside churches. Arabic mixed with Nubian languages. New customs blended with old ones. Over centuries, Islam became the dominant faith. But Sudan never lost its layered identity. Faith in Sudan was not sudden. It was gradual. It was blended. It was human. By the 15th century, the Christian kingdoms faded, weakened by internal struggles and shifting trade routes. In their place, Islamic sultanates rose. The most powerful was the Funj Sultanate, also called the Sultanate of Sennar.
Your scrolls offer conflicting strategies for the aqueduct. We must agree on a single path forward.
If I may, Your Majesty.
The Fungi ruled much of central Sudan for over 300 years. They unified tribes. They encouraged Islamic learning. They controlled trade between Africa and the Red Sea. Islam in Sudan took a unique form, deeply spiritual. Guided by Sufi orders, Sufi teachers traveled village to village, teaching peace, discipline, poetry and devotion. Sudanese Islam became gentle but strong, strict in faith, soft in heart. But new forces were approaching, forces with guns, ships, and global ambitions. The age of empires was beginning and Sudan stood in their path. The world was changing fast. Across oceans, powerful nations were building ships, factories and weapons. Empires were expanding, searching for land, labor and control. Sudan could not escape this storm. From the north, Ottoman Egypt, ruled by Muhammad Ali Pasha, turned its eyes southward. Egypt wanted Sudan's gold, land, soldiers, and control of the Nile. Soon Sudan fell under Turco-Egyptian rule. For many Sudanese, this period was heavy and painful. Taxes were harsh, local leaders were ignored, and worst of all, slavery increased. Men, women, and children were captured and sold. Families were broken. Villages lived in fear. Religion, once a source of comfort, felt distant under foreign rule. Many Sudanese felt humiliated, forgotten, and oppressed. And then, a voice rose from the west. His name was Muhammad Ahmad. He was a quiet religious man, a Sufi teacher, a man of prayer. In 1881 he declared something that shook the land. He said he was the Mahdi, the guided one sent by God to restore justice and faith. People listened, not because of fear, but because of hope. The Mahdi spoke against corruption, foreign rule, slavery, and injustice. He called people back to true faith and dignity. Tribes united. Farmers joined warriors. Scholars stood beside soldiers. Sudan rose. The Mahdi's army, armed mostly with faith and courage, defeated powerful forces again and again. In 1885, the unthinkable happened. Khartoum fell. The Mahdist forces defeated the British-led army and General Charles Gordon was killed. Sudan was free. For the first time in decades, Sudan ruled itself. But freedom came with challenges. The Mahdi died soon after victory. His successor, the Khalifa Abdullahi, struggled to hold the massive land together. Famine struck. Diseases spread. Internal conflicts grew. And outside forces were watching closely. Britain would not forget Sudan. The empire returned, stronger, more prepared, and determined. In 1898, British forces defeated the Mahdi state at the Battle of Omdurman, using modern weapons against brave but poorly equipped fighters. Sudan entered a new chapter, this time under Anglo-Egyptian rule. The colonizers built railways, schools and cities, but they ruled from above, dividing people, controlling resources, and shaping Sudan to serve foreign interests. North and South were treated differently. Tribes were separated, languages and cultures were misunderstood. Yet something powerful was growing beneath the surface. Education created thinkers, cities created movements, religion created unity. Sudanese people were learning to organize, speak, and demand dignity. And slowly, quietly, the idea of independence began to spread. The chains were no longer physical, they were political, and Sudan was preparing to break them. After decades of foreign rule, after years of quiet resistance, After the world itself was shaken by two great wars, Sudan finally stood at the edge of freedom. In the years after World War II, empires weakened, Britain could no longer hold distant lands. Across Africa, nations demanded independence. Sudan was ready. On January 1, 1956, Sudan became an independent nation. No gunfire, no last battle, just hope. People dreamed of unity, dignity, and a future shaped by Sudanese hands. But freedom came with a heavy inheritance. Sudan was vast, one of the largest countries in Africa. Its people were many: Arab, Nubian, Beja, Four, Nuba, Dinka, Nuer, and more. Its religions were diverse, its cultures deep and different. Colonial rule had not united these differences, it had divided them. Even before independence, tension between the North and the South had begun to grow. The North was mostly Arab and Muslim, the South was mostly African, Christian and traditional in belief. Under colonial rule, these regions were governed separately. They were never taught to truly understand one another.
A new chapter begins on the banks of the Nile, marked by hope and the solemn weight of history.
Now they were forced into one nation unprepared. Only 1 year after independence, Sudan fell into its first civil war. Brother fought brother, villages burned, trust shattered, military coups replaced democracy, civilian governments rose and fell, power moved from hand to hand. But peace never stayed long. The first civil war ended in 1972 with a fragile peace. The South gained limited autonomy. For a moment, Sudan breathed, but the peace did not last. In the 1980s, oil was discovered in the South. Instead of bringing unity, it brought greed and conflict. The government tried to impose Islamic law across the entire country. The South resisted, and the Second Civil War began. Longer, deadlier, more devastating than the first. It lasted over 20 years. More than 2 million lives were lost. Millions were displaced. Children grew up knowing only war, yet, even in darkness, people survived. Communities shared food, songs were sung quietly, faith remained. Finally, in 2005, a peace agreement was signed. It offered the South a choice. In 2011, after a national vote, South Sudan became independent. Sudan was split into two nations. Some celebrated, others mourned. Sudan had lost land, oil, and people, but its struggles were not over. Another wound remained open. In the west, Darfur, while Sudan was still bleeding from civil war and division, another tragedy was unfolding in the west. In a vast land of sand, farms, and ancient communities called Darfur, Darfur had its own long history. Once a proud sultanate, rich in culture, poetry, and trade, but for decades, it was neglected by the central government. Roads were few, schools were scarce, opportunities were rare. As resources became scarce and climate change dried the land, tensions grew between farmers and nomadic herders. Then politics turned tension into violence. In the early 2000s, rebel groups in Darfur rose up, accusing the government of neglect and discrimination. The response was brutal.
Get out of the way! They are burning everything! Run!
Government-backed militias known as the Janjaweed attacked villages. Homes were burned, crops destroyed, people were killed or forced to flee. The world watched in shock. Hundreds of thousands died, millions were displaced. Darfur became one of the worst humanitarian crises of the modern age. Sudan's name was now spoken with sorrow and anger across the world. Inside the country, life grew harder everywhere. Economic problems deepened, sanctions tightened, corruption spread. At the center of power stood Omar al-Bashir, who had ruled since 1989 through military strength and fear. For years, protests were crushed, voices were silenced. But history teaches one thing clearly: when pressure builds long enough, something must break. In 2018, it finally did. The price of bread rose, fuel became scarce, daily life became unbearable, and the people said, enough. This time, the protests did not stop. Students marched, doctors joined, workers walked out, mothers stood beside daughters, and at the heart of the revolution were Sudanese women, strong, fearless, determined. Images of women standing atop cars chanting for freedom became symbols of a nation awakening. After months of pressure, in April 2019 the unthinkable happened. Omar al-Bashir was removed from power. The streets exploded with joy, tears flowed, songs echoed through the night. Sudan stood again at a crossroads. A civilian-led future seemed possible, but revolutions are fragile. Power struggles followed. Military and civilian leaders argued over control. Old habits refused to die. Hope lived beside fear. Sudan's people had tasted freedom, and they refused to forget its flavor. Even when violence returned, even when leaders failed, even when the future felt uncertain, the Sudanese spirit endured. And today, Sudan still stands in a difficult moment, pulled between past wounds and future dreams. But its story is not only one of pain, it is also a story of survival. Sudan today stands at a difficult emotional and historic moment. It is a land that has known greatness, suffering, loss, and resilience. It is a land that refuses to disappear. Sudan is not just a country in the news. It is a living home to millions of people who wake up every day, work, love, pray, laugh, and hope, even when life is hard. Despite political instability, economic hardship, and ongoing conflict, Sudanese culture remains strong, families remain close, hospitality remains sacred, respect for elders remains deep. A guest is fed even when food is scarce. A neighbor is helped even when hands are empty. Sudanese culture is built on community. Meals are shared, stories are told, songs carry history, music blends African rhythm with Arab melody. Poetry speaks of land, love, and loss. Clothing reflects modesty, pride, and identity. Sudan's many ethnic groups, Arab, Nubian, Beja, Four, Nuba, Nilotic peoples, are threads in one wide tapestry. Diversity is not new to Sudan, it is ancient. Islam remains central for most Sudanese, especially its Sufi traditions, focused on patience, humility, peace, and service. Spiritual leaders still teach values, kindness, discipline, forgiveness, endurance. Faith has helped people survive what politics could not.
There is no God but God. We praise you, sustainer. There is no God but God.
Sudanese youth are educated, creative, and deeply aware of the world. They speak multiple languages. They dream beyond borders. They want peace, jobs, education, dignity, a voice. They are not asking for luxury. They are asking for a chance. They are the same youth who filled the streets in revolution, the same youth who refused silence, the same youth who believes Sudan can still rise. Sudan's challenges are real and painful. War has displaced millions. Inflation has weakened daily life. Healthcare and education struggle. Trust in leadership has been broken again and again. But Sudan's history teaches us something important. This land has survived worse. Empires fell, colonizers ruled, nations split, and still Sudan remains. If this documentary taught you something, moved you, or opened your heart, support it. Like this story. Share it. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe to keep these histories alive. Because stories protect memory. Memory protects identity. And identity protects the future. Sudan is not finished. Its next chapter is still being written by its people, by its youth, by those who refuse to give up. And now that you know its story, you are part of it too. The story of Sudan lives on